All right, we got another drum setup miking breakdown. All right, starting with kick drum. This is kind of like a poppy metalcore type band, and I mean they got some really technical stuff too. And I think learning from that, I think next time we're gonna try and do like a kick pad for the kicks, because sometimes the hands will be good, but the kicks, some of the really fast parts, because they have some really technical drum parts. A kick can get kind of easily kind of missed, or if the hands are good but the kicks are kind of need a little bit of help in the editing process, it's just better to have those separated. This time we have my DW22 and EMAD 2. I have, if you can see, some old cut up guitar magazines in there from the 70s. I have a ton of those, and I've been trying them in kicks, and they're really cool in kick drums. I was very surprised. Bonham's pretty famous for using them. I think a couple jazz guys. But the thing that I was surprised about was how heavy they were. And that really helps cut down the shell resonance of a drum and make it way more splatty and attacky, and have just like a very strong sub kind of fundamental tone. So really good for kick drum kind of tones, like metal kick drum tones. But the thing that I didn't expect, and it's not that big of a deal, especially because I know I'm going to be replacing the kick like 100% when I'm mixing this, but I have a Beta 91 in here, and you can hear, like when you hear it being played as a song, you don't really hear it, but when you solo the Beta 91 that's in there, as you can see, I put a towel in here so it's not flopping, but you do still hear some of this flopping around in there. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because you hear it if you solo it, but you don't really notice it in a mix, I don't think. So yeah, next time I'm not going to have that in there, and I think it's kind of like, unless I'm doing rock kicks or something else, it's not really the way to go. There's too much noise and movement in there, especially when putting like a mic inside of it. Beta 91 on the inside, D6 also on the inside, and then sub kick as the out mic. This time we tried my stock DW Reso head with these holes. It does not have a ring like a Power Stroke 3. Really cuts down the resonance like majorly, but I think it felt better to play for this kind of thing. Definitely prefer a Power Stroke 3 for the main, for almost any other kick drum though. Okay, moving over to the snare. I started with a Beta 57A on the top, and I started with the i5 on the bottom, but I switched it out. Did not like how that Beta sounded on the top. Honestly, just a weird, horrible sounding mic for snare. Like, I was hoping that the bleed was going to be really good, and that was more important to me, but the Audix beat it out and it sounded better. And then I put the M160 on the bottom, which is just a great mic, man. I love that mic. It's just so useful. You'll even see over here, I actually ended up, there wasn't a lot of ride on here, but the drummer has like one of those ice bells. I think it's the August Burns Red Strummers one. I can't remember his name right now, Matt something. But that thing is so loud, but I wanted a spot mic on it. So it was clipping almost any other mic I had, but throw, this guy up on it. Great rejection, very focused sound, very balanced, very round, almost kind of pre-compressed. Fantastic for that. All right, next up, toms. Last time I did this band, we used the DW toms, but I've been switching the tom heads around, trying to kind of find the perfect kind of tom heads for each tom. And I really found that pinstripes on the DWs are the way to go. So the DWs have pinstripes over ambassadors, and these guys have clear emperors over ambassadors. And they all have little bits of cotton balls in them. I think this one actually has maybe too much, but I do a lot goes a long way with these, so that's just kind of a note. 421s on the toms. Last time we used D2s. I have the D2s on the bottoms this time, which are awesome. So you can see down there. And then going to cymbal mics. My go-to classic hi-hat mic is an AKG 460. It's kind of like a 451. This time we used the U89s, Neumann U89s, which are essentially like a U87 circuit, but with a smaller capsule like a 414 in them. And I really like these. I've kind of had this big realization lately, especially with like MP3s and streaming and all this kind of stuff. I find that the 414s, they have a little bit too much zippy air. Like on their own, they sound fine, especially like in a really dense metal mix. They're almost too zingy and sizzly up top, you know, where these are very round on the top, but they have kind of more mid-range focus detail. And especially with, you know, listening with streaming and MP3s and everything like that, that super high-end detail is like the first thing to get lost when you convert it to a lesser you know, quality audio format. So these really, I find, just really kind of are very, very balanced for cymbals. And then over here we have the AKG C1000, which is kind of a horrible sounding mic. I honestly haven't, the only other place I want to try it on snare bottom, but it is the go-to China mic. I don't know why. It just sounds exactly like how I want my Chinas to sound. So that's been over here. We had two Chinas going, 17 and a 16 Paiste. So we had this guy here, Paiste 2016. The drummer has a, I believe it's a 16. No, it's an 18 Zildjian S. But it's an S dark, and it just has no high end. So just for recording, it's really not right. This guy here is a Stag or Wuhan, and it's one that I got. Somebody cut it down. Somebody like gave it to me, but unfortunately, it sounds great. But unfortunately, it finally cracked in this session, which I'm not surprised about this at all. It was time. The cymbal wise, we were actually using this 20 Explosion Crash on the right for the first two songs. This is such a great, evil, it's quick, but it's dark and like just has such a big like sound, but it sits kind of in the mix. But not such a like huge cymbal like a 22 or anything would, just sit way below. It's still got that aggressive crack that you want from like a crash in a modern like metal context. And then over here, for the most part, we did not have this cymbal. We had the drummer cymbal, which is an 18 AAX Explosion Fast Crash, which, man, the Explosion Crashes are just, I think they're just unbeatable. This 19-inch Evolution we had in this main spot for one of the songs, I think the last song. I really am about how, like, you know, if there's one cymbal that's being crashed in a section, how important it is to have that sounding like the right cymbal, you know. The song where we changed to this one, the chorus, I think, had a bit more of like an uplifting presence. And the cymbal has like a bit of a higher tone, more shimmery, less aggressive, but still very beautiful. And it just works so much better for that song than, for example, this one, which I love how this sounds, but it just has an evil sound to it. And then, you know, hi-hats, we ended up actually using 3 different pairs for each three songs we did. This is Meinl Byzance 14 medium. They're pretty heavy. They're like, I think it's like a 12 on the top. Let me see here. Yeah, almost 12. And then almost 14 on the bottom. So they're pretty heavy. And we used that for the last song that has like some pretty aggressive hi-hats that are just open the whole time. The second song that we did has, where are they? I think they are, actually, no, I think I put them away. They are 15-inch Paiste Modern Essential 602s. And we also had a 602 Ride, actually. Where is that? Yeah, 24-inch 602 Ride. There's like just a little bit of ride on that medium ride. And that was a perfect combo for that. Just very, very pretty cymbals. And then the first song we used, the drummer, he had a pair of A Custom Zildjian 14s, and that's what we used for the first song. Okay, room mics. I got 2 sets of room mics here, a pair of 414s and Bloomline, set kind of like directly in front of the kit, just acting as like almost like a secondary, more distant pair of overheads that are a little more crashy and brashy. So if you want to have something a little bit less super direct than the overheads, they're great to just blend in. And then I had a pair of Coles 4038s sitting here facing outwards from the baffles. And the way that I experimented with these a little bit, because usually what I do is I usually have them facing inwards like that, so that the positive end of the lobes is kind of facing towards the inside of the drum set. And I find that's like a really good, it's ambient, but it's still got a bit of punch and everything. But with the setup that we had and the kick and everything, it was just picking up like only kick drum. And that was like really not working for me. So I ended up putting them like this, and it just completely, it didn't completely cut out the kick drum, but it just went to straight ambience, which is what I try to get with these. Like almost no direct sound at all. So they almost like act as like a reverb chamber mic or something if I throw some reverb on them. And then the final one was the TLM 67, which I've used before. Got it in Omni, and it's just such a balanced mic, especially for drums. So really loving it. We also had a Splash here, and we had a good old little Pro 37 on there. Great mic. Yeah, so that's all of the mics. And then here you can see what I have set up. So boundary mic for the kick, inside, outside, which is just the sub, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat direct, left and right overheads, toms, top and bottom, ride solo, 67 solo, 414 pair, Coles pair, and then I have tom bottom mics going through the console, as well as the Splash and the China spot mics. So for overheads, which I've kind of been finding is like the most important thing, I have them going through the Vintex, and I find that I find that the Vintex seem to be the best. Like I was saying before about the 414s and the really high end top detail being nice, but being a little too airy, too sizzly almost. I find that these preamps have the smoothest high end, just kind of adding to that kind of character where the high end's there, but it's not overly shimmery. There isn't like all these weird, not even weird, just all these like kind of extra harmonics up there. It's just really rounded out. So there's no EQ on here, but and I do have the pads on the mics, but I am going over to the curve bender and high passing at 80, which I think probably goes up quite a bit higher than that, boosting a little bit of 150, and that's just really helping bring out the snare and the warmth and the kind of like roundness of the cymbals. I find cutting out a bit of boxiness from the room, cutting out a bit of harshness at 6.5K, and boosting just a little bit of sizzle at 16K. I just find this helps just open up those mics. If I had the 414s, I wouldn't have been using that, but that just really sort of helps just add a little bit of sparkle up there, which just feels, honestly, it feels better to play. So yeah, so that's the overheads, and then the room mics here are going into the TG. Always low impedance with those Coles, and this is Coles, sorry. And then the 67 is going through the Helios with a bit of EQ. It looks like we're just cutting out a bit of mid-range and taking off a little bit of top end. And then it was going through this guy here, just giving it in all buttons in mode, just giving it a little bit of crunch, mostly when he hits the snare, and that was really useful. Okay, so for kick drum, I got the Beta 91 going into the Vintech, low impedance, boosting quite a lot at 110, cutting some low mids, boosting a lot of highs. That's kind of what you got to do for pretty much almost any kick drum. And then I do believe that the Audix was going through one of these APIs, and then it was going into this Tone Lux here, where I'm doing kind of the same thing. Looks like I'm cutting about 360, 400, boosting like 32 hertz on a tight Q. Looks like I'm also boosting like about somewhere around 3K, 4K. And then also on a shelf boosting like 10K just to get a bit of that air. Or sorry, no, not 10K. Shelf at like 1.8K, just really bringing that out. Snare mics are going through the other two Vintex. That i5 is pretty hot. So I have gain all the way low, high impedance, and I have the output back down quite a bit. I actually changed the output knobs to spacing on my Vintex, so full up is straight down, because I almost always have them back down a little bit, so that feels like kind of about normal for me. I actually find that if you send line level into a lot of preamps with an output control, unity is sort of about somewhere around there. So you're actually just boosting like line level signal here. So I usually have those back down a little bit. Same thing with these guys here, is I almost always have them at 7. And then if I need to do a slight micro adjustment, I can, especially if I'm doing pairs. Like you'll see this one was at 8, and this one, I think I had it sort of at 9. So yeah, so that's pretty low. Got a bit of EQ, a little bit of 220, a little bit of 3K. These EQs are so sensitive, like just passing off the notch can just almost be a bit too much sometimes for tracking EQ, in my opinion. Snare bottom, which is the M160. I've been doing this thing lately, which it didn't seem to work so well this time. It wasn't bad, but I got to revisit the session I did it on last. I can't remember what bottom mic I was using, but it I've been cranking it to the point where it's almost distorting, and then backing the output down. Like this is, like you can see here, like I had it here, and it just kind of adds this like this compression and explosiveness to the bottom snare, which I think works really well. Got it on low impedance as well. Tom, top, and bottom are the Wonders, which I don't love them for the toms. They're all right. I like the EQs, but they're not quite what I would normally use. I think like the Vintex are a bit better. But I kind of they were kind of like my last. They weren't bad or anything, but I had other mic pre's for the other mics that I was much more gung-ho on using those for those. So these are sort of leftovers, and they gave me the EQ, which I wanted. Just a bit of like basic EQ, top is rack, bottom is floor. Just one click up on the gain. Yeah, so yeah, with these, this little piece of tape here I put, that's unity gain on these. So, noted. And then for the AKGs, I have the room mics here, in the Langevin, sorry, and no compressors, but I do have a bit of EQ going on, and these are kind of Pultec styles. So like, it's a very, very broad curve. So this bass, it looks like it's essentially like about 2 dB down on 12K, 2 dB down on 80 hertz, which is really just like a kind of probably a mid-bell boost is probably how I'd put it, just to kind of like focus the sound in what's going to be useful in a metal context. And that's it, guys.